Happy Eclipse Weekend, Williams Baptist University. You're listening to the Williams Pulse Podcast. My name is Nolan Williams. I'm a student here at Williams, and I'm joined by staff member Bill Jeffrey.
Hello.
So we have a very special episode today featuring Dr. Steve McMann, the Associate Professor of Natural Sciences. He's our resident eclipse expert. So here's a quick summary of what this weekend holds, and then we'll get straight into the interviews.
So admissions news, you can still apply, you can still get accepted, you can still register for classes, and you can still sign up for the VIP day. All those links are in our show notes. So if you're interested in coming to Williams this fall, we have a spot for you. Get started today by applying for free. Check out the show notes. Nolan, we have a lot of events going on this weekend for the eclipse. That's why this episode's coming out today instead of Sunday.
So Saturday at 1 p.m., there's going to be music with one of our WBU students, DJ Fitzgerald, at the Wings of Honor Museum.
And then on Sunday at 10:30, we have a worship service in the Manley Chapel. Our president, Dr. Norman's going to be speaking, and then the worship team's going to be leading worship. At 2 o'clock, the singers are going to perform in the chapel. At 3 o'clock, the Williams Band is going to perform in the chapel. And then at 7:30, head over to the Wings of Honor Museum where the cast will be performing.
On Monday at 10 o'clock, the WBU worship team is going to perform again at the Wings of Honor Museum. And then 11 o'clock, the jazz band is going to perform at the Wings of Honor Museum.
So 1:40 to 2:10 is like the best time to view the eclipse. So nothing's going to be going on during that time other than people standing outside and looking up at the sky with their eclipse glasses on. Speaking of that, you ready to jump into the interview?
Let's do it.
Well, Dr. McMann, thank you for joining us today. How long have you been at Williams?
Oh, I've been here about 20 years now.
And what all do you teach?
I teach courses in biology, ecology, zoology, entomology, which is a class on insects, zoology is animals, botany. I teach the principles of biology, which is an introductory biology course, part 1. And let's see, I think that's about it. And also anatomy and physiology classes.
So I've walked into SC 101 and seen like pictures of insects on the board. That's you?
That's probably me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are amazing. Like anytime that we're giving a tour, they're like, who draws those insects? They're so like perfect.
Did you minor in art by chance?
I have sort of a just kind of a pre-existing genetic talent in art. So people encouraged me to go into art, and I didn't want to because I wanted to do science and explore the mysteries of the world and things akin to that, rather than just drawing them. So
wow, I had no idea. That's amazing. Okay, hey, well, not to jump straight into what we want to know about most, but next Monday, it's the Total Solar Eclipse. So can you just briefly explain, give us an introduction on what will happen, and then we got a bunch of questions we want to jump into.
Okay. Well, of course, on Monday, we'll have a total eclipse of the sun as the moon, as it is orbiting the Earth, passes between the sun and part of the Earth. And during that time, the moon's shadow will race northeastwards across North America, and we will be in line to have a total eclipse, meaning that the moon will completely cover the sun, and that can sometimes be a really, really dramatic event.
So does it get super dark? Have you seen one before?
Yeah, well, back in 2017, I took my family off to Giant City State Park in Illinois to see the total eclipse there. And, the weather forecast was for a nice day or a clear day. And I was curious about it, and I didn't know in advance whether I would be impressed or not. I've seen lots of partial eclipses before, and so we went up there with an open mind, a good way to spend the afternoon. And as the time for totality approached, it gradually got darker and darker. And then when totality arrived, it suddenly became nighttime, as if somebody turned the lights off with a dimmer. And all of the people there just let out a collective gasp when that happened.
Really?
And so it really was dramatic. And then you could look up and you could see the moon with the sun's corona around it. And it really was pretty spectacular. And so I went home happy that day. I had seen something that I hadn't seen before. And so yeah, it can be... Wow. Depending on what you consider to be spectacular, it can be a very spectacular natural event.
That sounds spectacular. What are the odds that this eclipse is going to just be wrong and not go right over Arkansas?
Well, the astronomical events are certain. I mean, that's been worked out, down to the second, and that's not, there's no question about that. Where the uncertainty is that with any astronomical event, like a meteor shower or auroras or things like that, we don't know what kind of weather will be occurring, and the weather that will play a big role in what we see. And so one thing I could do now is present a few scenarios about what could happen under different conditions.
Okay, let's hear them.
Okay, so one possibility is that there are no clouds to obscure the sun, and then it'll be very much like the 2017 eclipse. You'll see the corona and a few stars and planets in a dark sky. And in an open place like near the college, if there isn't much cloud cover overall, then maybe you'll be able to see the lighter skies in the distance surrounding the moon's shadow. And particularly to the south, because we're going to be a little bit south of the center of totality. And so that'll be quite a sight. Now, I should mention that the moon and the sun are often really hard to photograph. I tried to point my phone up at the sun and took a few pictures, or at whatever you want to call it, the moon, with which was in front of the sun, and tried to take a few pictures, and it was all, even just the corona was bright enough to blow it out, and so all I got was a blob of light. But I took lots of really nice pictures of the sky and the landscape and the things like that when when the eclipse was occurring.
Yeah, so I've seen the eclipse sunglasses everywhere. My mom sent me home with two after break.
Yeah.
But so I assume you recommend them.
Well, if you talk about, this I guess would be a good time to talk about eclipse safety, because if the sky is cloudless, that'll be very, very important. And what you don't want to ever do is look at the sun.
Yeah.
Because if you look at
But
the
it's
sun,
my favorite planet.
yeah, if you look at the sun for even a few seconds, you can very severely permanently damage your eye and vision, and people do that. And of course, as you're going into totality and things like that, it is tempting to look at the sun. But even if you're at 99.9% of totality and there's only a tiny sliver or point of the sun's disk still visible, you look at that for a few seconds, you can really do yourself a lot of harm.
Wow.
So, so what I did, at least, I'll just talk what I did during the eclipse and encourage my family to do, is just not look at the sun. Now, there are eclipse glasses that are being sold widely, and many of them are very well built. There may also be frauds and things akin to that, and glasses could be damaged and things like that. So the eclipse glasses are designed so that you can look at a partial eclipse and have it be safe. I tend to be one of these very over careful things and don't try to look at it when the sun is visible. However, once you reach 100% totality and the lights go out, then you can just look at the moon and the corona surrounding it and things like that, as long as you're very careful, once again, when that first point of light appears on the other side of totality, that you look away. Mm-hmm. And so that's something you want to get right and be very careful about.
Okay, so during totality, then, you can take off your sunglasses, though?
During totality. And in fact, during totality, the eclipse glasses won't let you see the moon and the corona, because it'll be so much dimmer than even a tiny bit of the sun. So
what's the difference between these eclipse glasses and just regular sunglasses?
Here I'm getting a little bit out of my depth, but they are darker, so that they cut out more of the light. And I believe that they're designed also to specifically cut out ultraviolet light, which is the most damaging. But here I'm definitely very far out of my depth.
Okay. Well, I plan on using my good camera on a tripod. And I guess I'd need to get like a filter to put on the end of it. Like it's like a sunglasses, so you can shoot in brighter situations with lower,
There are tutorials online for taking photographs of the eclipse. And again, I don't it involves often bracketing exposures and multiple exposures and all sorts of things like that. And, I'm out of my depth with that. I'll probably look at the sky and the landscape.
Do you think administration would be happy with me if I got a picture of the eclipse and with our chapel in the same picture?
That sounds nice.
That's going to be my aim.
Yeah. I should also talk about, as long as we're talking about this, one scenario is perfectly clear skies and, you'll see the corona and all that kind of stuff. But what if other kinds of weather occur? And so let me talk just a little bit about some of the other possibilities. And one other possibility is that there'll be lots of high clouds. And when I say high clouds, I mean clouds that are several miles above the surface. And of course, the more cloudiness you have, some high clouds can be translucent, but the more clouds there are, the less you'll see of the corona and the sun and the things like that. But if conditions are right, then a high cloud sheet can act like a giant projector screen for the moon's shadow, and you may be able to see the leading edge of the shadow, as we move into totality, the leading edge of the shadow advancing across the sky and
be cool.
Passing overhead. And supposedly, I've never seen that, but it can be scary and awe-inspiring, and the sky might turn odd colors and things akin to that, and then you see the back edge of the shadow approaching and passing overhead. So under perfect conditions, that can happen, even if you don't get much of a show from the sun itself. And then, of course, another scenario is low clouds, for example, heavy low clouds and rain and drizzle and things like that. And then there are fewer things to see in the sky, but it will still get dark during totality. And in fact, if you have a lot of heavy low clouds, that'll cut off a lot of the light coming in from the side. So supposedly it will get even darker if there are low clouds than if there was a clear sky. So it could become, extremely dramatically dark, even if the weather, which is worth seeing perhaps, even if the weather is awful in a more, conventional way, if that makes sense.
So is this why in times past, before we had all of our modern technology and we couldn't predict when the eclipse would happen, is this why people put so much spiritual significance into these types of events?
Realize that all the way back for hundreds of years, people have been able to predict the exact timing of eclipses.
Even in regions, like they knew specifically like what part of...
Yeah, exactly where it would happen and things like that, because that's just math.
Okay.
It's just trig. So what might want to run in...
very advanced math,
yeah,
might I add.
Yeah. It's, and it's whatever you're good at, if that makes sense. What we might want to lead into approach that thing is, what might be the spiritual significance of this event.
We can totally get there. Okay. I'd love to ask that question too. The way you described it, I just thought I could see how if you didn't expect that to happen that day, that could be a terrifying thing.
It can be. And of course, there are people that in history have been surprised by eclipses. And certainly before people were able to figure out, how planets moved.
Or you just didn't
eclipses were not predictable.
Right. Or you didn't get the memo that it was happening.
Yeah, or you didn't
because you
get
live
the memo.
somewhere where,
Yeah, so they can be perhaps frightening. And I think there are many cases in history of people being frightened by eclipses and wondering if this represents some sort of a profound spiritual event and things like that, and other astronomical events as well. So yeah, that can happen.
Awesome.
So how often do total eclipses happen? And then what are the odds that we see another one in Arkansas again in our lifetime? Because I know we've had a couple of partial, but this is the...
Yeah. Okay, well, in any one particular place, total eclipses are rare, and so they're rare in any one particular place. I think the average return time for a total eclipse in one particular average spot on Earth is something like once every 300 years. That means you could have two in 1 year and such in some places, and go thousands of years in other places. But of course, we can move. And what some people do as hobbies is they chase eclipses. And even though total eclipses are rare in any one place, there is a total eclipse somewhere in the world pretty much every year or so, about every 18 months. So if you like to travel, you can see them relatively often. And I think the next one, and don't quote me on this, but I believe the next total eclipse is going to cut across Europe or parts of Europe next year, Spain and then on and northeastwards to Russia. And so on every year or so, somewhere in the world, there will be one. So the next one in North America is not going to be for a while. And again, don't quote me, but I think the next one in North America is, or at least in the United States, is maybe 2044.
Oh, wow.
And so it'll be a while. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know if the path of totality crosses Arkansas on that one. So if you really want to see total eclipses, you travel and intercept them where they occur. But otherwise, we'll see lots of partial eclipses between now and 2044.
Okay.
So, is there any spiritual significance to this event? And do you think aliens are going to visit Earth that day?
Well, let me take on the first of those two questions. And of course, Williams Baptist University is a Christian university, and so it's good to think about the Christian perspective on this whole thing. And of course, if you read the Bible, it has many, many, many things to say in many places about the relationship between physical things, God, and us. But I think that if we integrate across all of it, maybe a reasonable thing to say is that creation is good and that we should interact with it wisely in ways that encourage our flourishing. So, I think we can all enjoy the eclipse, etc. But of course, where there can be trouble is when we confuse physical things, stuff like material wealth and things like that, with God. And of course, we should have a very different relationship with physical things than our relationship with God. And that's also discussed in many, many places in the Bible. So I think we can enjoy the eclipse as just, physical events or the physical world going through physical processes and things like that. But I think our relationship with God is something different than that. And then also in terms of enjoying it, I think that it's important to realize that it's going to be kind of like fishing, where you don't know what you're going to catch in advance, and the weather makes it that way. So hopefully, whatever happens, if you're going to go out there and chase it, that you'll have a good time.
That's a good perspective. I like that analogy. So, in your estimation, though, the Book of Revelation does not predict this eclipse coming right over Arkansas at like 1:50-ish on April 8th, 2024?
Well, a lot of times when weird things happen in the physical world, people will, turn to that and try and find patterns and, this is it, the end, the end is on hand. And then, of course, what happens is life just keeps going on. So, I don't know the future in terms of that stuff, and we're not supposed to know the future in terms of that sort of stuff. But I'm going to treat life as if, maybe I won't be here tomorrow, but maybe I will, and and treat other people, et cetera, and so on in that way.
All right. Now, what about aliens? Tell us about the aliens visiting Earth on the eclipse day.
Oh, I don't know anything about aliens.
You think they're out there?
I have, might we find microbes on Mars? Who knows? It's an unanswerable question.
If this wasn't a Baptist university, what would you say?
It's in particular, it's a completely unanswerable question.
All right. Well, Dr. McMann, thank you so much for joining us. This was super informative. Anything else you want to add?
It was a pleasure. I think I'm good.
Awesome.
Just hopefully everyone will have a good time. Of course, do make sure that you're safe in terms of your eyes, and then hopefully it'll be a very safe and enjoyable event.
Dr. McMahon, thank you so much for joining us. Next time I want to hear more about aliens, though, because I'm really curious about what everybody's opinion on aliens is now.
I still think they exist. So
Okay, you heard it here. Nolan thinks they exist. I hope this episode comes back to haunt you one day in your political career. All right, well,
this has been
and will continue to be
the Williams Pulse.